happy to have Stan Swartz here from Sloan Partners LLP to be talking about subsidies and other issues. Before we jump into that, I just want to go over a couple things related to Zoom. So all attendees on this webinar are muted to provide for the best experience for the speaker and all the attendees. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter them in the question and answer box, and they will be answered at the end of the webinar. Or alternatively, raise your hand when we are doing questions and I will unmute you to ask your question verbally. Okay, so we'll jump into the webinar now. Stan, go for it.
All right, thanks, Amy. I'll just ask Amy to take control of the slides and just prompt her as to when to move to the next slide. So thanks everyone for joining us. Going over some very important issues, government subsidies and some other stuff that's going on right now. Not only are we in the midst of a pandemic, but we're also dealing with a heat wave. So I imagine everyone's super busy, not only trying to figure out the rules and the regulations and the issues that surround being in the middle of that pandemic, but also probably being swamped with definitely air conditioning issues. So good luck with dealing with everything, and I hope you're able to get through everything safe and happy and healthy, and learning how to deal with it and take advantage of some of the things that there are to be taken advantage of. And I'll get into that as we go through the slides. So again, doing business during the pandemic, and the devil is always in the details. Not only do you have lots to deal with as far as rules, regulations, and government bureaucracy during this time, but now you've got this extra layer of the stuff that the government's thrown at us to deal with, probably couched a little bit by them trying to help us. So I'm sure everyone's aware of the Canada wage subsidy, which was brought into effect in March. It's now been extended to August 29th. The Canada Emergency Business Account applies to businesses that pay employees as contractors and or by dividends. The caveat there is you must have had a business bank account prior to March the 1st, 2020. So you may have been paid only by dividends or maybe as a subcontract, depending on how your firm is structured, and figure that you can go back. But if you didn't have a bank account prior to March the 1st, 2020, you're probably going to be out of luck. One of the new developments in that area, the program is now being administered by Export Development Canada. Why that is, I don't know, but there's been an extra layer of scrutiny put on new applicants. So if you hadn't applied up till now, your application process is going to be scrutinized by Export Development Canada. It was a fairly simple application process prior to that. So again, they're looking at taking a little bit more caution and doing a little bit more due diligence on the applicants. The Canada Emergency Rent Assistance Program, you may or may not have been able to take advantage of it. If you're maybe a landlord yourself and have tenants that you may have tried to work with and using this program to assist them, or maybe you have a landlord that has assisted you with this program, but maybe they've said no, they're not getting involved in it for many reasons. Particularly, they want to stay off the radar with Canada Revenue Agency by getting involved with this application process and whatever red tape is surrounding it. But again, if your landlord has originally said no, I suggest you go back and have another conversation with them and see if there's a way to working things out and being able to take advantage of this program. Very valuable, can be a great assistance to you. So moving on, next slide, Amy. My main advice to everyone is document, because the more record keeping you do and the more documentation that you have, the easier it's going to be to deal with whatever government agency comes along and wants to scrutinize or audit your records that supported your application process. So CRA will be auditing subsidy payments. That may not happen for a year or two when they come visiting, but that audit may include not only the subsidy application, but your entire business. So while you may have not had an audit in the future, I suggest that you may not like the process. It can be very invasive, it can be very time consuming, and sometimes expensive, depending on whose resources you have to allocate. You have to get your accountant involved in dealing with CRA to deal with various audit issues. So one piece of advice is if you've submitted that wage subsidy application and you have other wage subsidy applications to submit, possibly have your accountant look it over before submitting it to make sure that it aligns with all the rules that exist, and possibly they may find some other opportunities that you may have not been aware of once they reviewed the application process. Know the program details. It's on the CRA, it's on the Canada.ca website. In fact, all the program details are on the Canada.ca website. And if you're not sure about anything, ask your accountant. Get on the phone with Canada.ca people, and ask them about the rules. You may have to be on hold for a while, but that could resolve or not get rid of the necessity of having to deal with amendments and repayments later on. So again, make sure you know the program. Qualification for various programs is dependent on revenue and payroll amounts. And be careful when your accountant records adjustments, particularly year-end adjustments. Make sure those adjustments are properly recorded in the period that they really do apply to. Adjustments for progress billing, work in progress, maybe bad debts, can create problems if they're just thrown into one particular period. And then CRA comes along and does an audit, and they say, well, you did these adjustments apply to this period, and that throws you offside for being eligible for the program, or maybe having to repay the subsidies that you had received for the program, because based on your basic bookkeeping, you were eligible. So, but by making those adjustments later on, and they're recorded in your books, it may throw you offside. So make sure that you have that conversation with your accountant to make sure those adjustments are properly applied, especially, like I said, progress billing, work in process, and the bad debts. So make sure of those. Financial statement analysis is particularly important, because when you're looking at your expenses period over period, the numbers may not be comparative because you've received the subsidies and you've reduced your labor costs by the subsidy reduced. And when you're looking at your numbers a year or two from now, you may say, what happened in that period? What were our actual costs before we recorded the subsidy? What would have been the real comparative numbers? So again, you don't want to have that misinterpretation of the financial results. That misinterpretation may also cause problems with your bank or lenders when they start looking at your financial statements and your gross profits are jumping up and down because of the subsidy amounts. So you want to have to alleviate the necessity to have to explain these things away later on. So I suggest putting the subsidies on a separate line, or recording it as other income at the end of the financial statements, so your actual results stay the same and consistent with prior periods. With the Canada Emergency Business Account, be careful what you use the money for. You cannot use it for debt repayment or to pay dividends that are not in the regular course of business. Like I said before, the wage subsidy is now eligible you're eligible for the wage subsidy if you pay by dividends. But those dividends have to remain consistent with what you've done in the past before receiving it. You can't use that account or those monies to repay shareholder loans, or perhaps to go out and invest the money in the stock market. That's not the intention. It's to help you maintain and continue to expand your business. And I don't mean expand the business by buying new equipment necessarily or buy property, but to continue to do things as you normally would and to follow a business plan that you may have had. So next slide, Davey. So taxes and filing dates and payments. The forgivable portion of the emergency business account could have special tax treatment. We don't have any details on that so far, but what I mean by the special treatment is because you're going to be able to not have to repay $10,000 of this amount, we're not sure and haven't gotten any guidance yet on how that $10,000 is going to be treated or needs to be treated for tax purposes. It may just become regular income and subject to your full tax rate, or it may be able to be treated as a capital gain, because there's a special section of the Income Tax Act that refers to gain on settlement of debt. And that, because you're going to be settling the debt at a lower amount than was originally lent to you, you may be eligible for capital gains treatment. on that $10,000. You're going to have to speak to your accountant about it. Probably he or she is not going to know now what it is, but make sure that you instill the idea so that they consider it later on when the repayment happens. It's complex. The rules are complex surrounding gain on settlement of debt. So, but make sure that you do take advantage if the advantage is there to be taken advantage of. Corporate tax returns that were due in June, July, or August, the filing deadline's now been extended to September 1st. But remember, not owing tax does not mean you don't have to file on time. So make sure that you don't file on time. Again, and not owing tax does not mean that you're not required to file on time. Make sure that you get the returns in on time. Many people take the position that, well, I don't owe any tax, so there's no rush to get the tax return in. There is you do need to get that in on time, because in a subsequent period, you may end up owing tax, and you may not file that particular return on time or pay the amount on time. CRA will look back and see if you late filed in a previous period, and if you late filed in a previous period, that means that you may be subject to higher penalties and interest than would otherwise be applied, because you on the return that you have now filed late. So again, make sure that you get your returns in on time. September 1st, if you had a December to 31, 2019 return year end, that return is now due September the 1st. Get it in on time. Tax and the installments due for 2019 are now all due on September the 1st as well. There's been no changes to the filing and due dates for payroll and HST returns. And the deferral of payment for HST did end on June the 30th. So again, continue to get those payroll and HST returns on time. There was no extension on the filing and due dates for those payroll and HST returns, even though the payment was deferred. Amy, you want to move on to the next one? The employer-employee situation is a real minefield right now. If there was been a temporary reduction to hours or wages after March the 1st, it does not result in constructive dismissal. Constructive dismissal is a situation where the employer unilaterally determines that they're going to reduce hours of work and the wages to an employee. The employee could assert or could have asserted that they have been constructively dismissed and then eligible for various severance and other settlement benefits under various legal provisions. So the Ontario government got rid of the constructive dismissal situation in the Labor Act for any wages or reduction in hours after the March the 1st. Again, that doesn't mean that somebody may not have a legal case against you or may try to bring one against you anyways because of something that their lawyer may have told them. So again, be careful of what you do. Refusal to work could result in ineligibility for the SURB. You may have situations where you've recalled people back to work, but they've said for whatever reason, health concerns, safety concerns, they want to take the summer off, they don't feel like coming back to work, they may not be eligible for the SURB. There could be a questionnaire that comes out later on for applicants and recipients of the SURB to complete. There could be a situation where the employer reports them to CRA and makes them ineligible for the SURB. So be careful of what you do. Document, like I said before, record everything. If, as and when you may have requested someone come back to work and they've refused. Remember, the SURB money is everyone's money. It's coming out of all our pockets, so we don't want people that should not have collected it to have collected. Refusal to work may be grounds for termination. So if they refuse to come back to work, they may not only miss their eligibility for the SURB, they may also be grounds for termination. And again, what the settlement obligations will be for that is a legal question. Moving on, Amy. Business interruption insurance, another complicated area. If you've suffered a loss of business and profits due to the pandemic, you may be unlikely that you have a provision in your business insurance that provides for coverage. We all know about lost profits insurance. I'm sure your brokers pointed that out to you when you've taken out or renewed your business insurance. But again, The lost business and lost profits due to this pandemic is a big question. The first answer insurance companies are giving, and some brokers that I know are providing, is that no, you're not covered. This is a special situation. It's an unlikely situation, an unforeseen situation that no one could have predicted, and consequently, you're not covered. It's not like a fire. It's not like a flood. It's what they kind of call an act of God, not predictable. We could not offer coverage, but that doesn't mean you may not have it. There's a number of class action lawsuits that are on the verge of being launched against insurance companies to make claims for lost profits. So again, go through your contract or your policy details, go over it with your broker, speak to your lawyer. Again, it may require a legal review, but don't take the first answer that's given to you as the only answer. Next. So working from home allowance or reimbursement. So you probably have some people that have worked from home, or you're providing an allowance to your people that have worked from home. It may be treated, or probably will be treated, as regular income to them when you be put on their T or included in their T4. They may be eligible for a deduction for certain office and home expenses, as in the past, if you've provided what's called a T2200 form for employees to be allowed to deduct certain personal expenses that they're not reimbursed for. So again, I'm sure the CRA is going to come out with some special rules and provision for people that have had to work from home, for the supplies that they've had to buy, for the additional internet costs that they may have had, possibly bought a computer, modifications to their home to be able to create that workspace. The rules up till now have been that they had to work out of a designated space in their home in order to have a deduction for the space in their home for tax purposes. That may all change because a lot of people never contemplated that this would be a situation. So my guess is right now that CRA is probably going to provide a flat rate for people that had to work from home. If you've been reimbursing them, make sure you keep the receipts for everything that you have reimbursed them. And the employees, again, they should keep receipts for whatever they have not been reimbursed for. So there's going to be audits of these sometime in the future, but keep all the documents again. And again, CRA is not providing any guidance on the tax deduction for this in this area. So next. So there's a lot of resources out there that you can check on. I suggest you continue to check on these to see what it is that the latest pronouncements are, what additional programs or updates that programs that the government's providing. We've got them on our website at sloangroup.ca. Constantly being updated is on the canada.ca website. Gives you the details and explanations of all the programs that are currently out there. I particularly want to suggest that you go to the CPA Canada website that covers the COVID-19 issues. You've got the link there. In particular, what they cover on that website is enforceability of commercial contracts, business interruption insurance, environmental obligations, privacy considerations, and managing work refusals. So there's additional resources there, which will give you some additional guidance and resources, particularly for some law firms when it comes into the employer-employee matters. And when you get into the employer-employee matters, one of the in particular is a very good website from Max People called Maypole Human Resources. They've got a constant update. They've got a weekly webinar, and they've got an employer handbook that you can download that in particular addresses a lot of the issues surrounding COVID-19. That's a great resource for you. So that's a quick overview of a lot of the stuff. I just have to provide this disclaimer to let you know what we've done, what it's for, and in particular, what we're not doing is rendering any legal advice. We've touched on some legal stuff, but I'm not providing any legal service. One thing to be aware of when it comes to the legal stuff and going back to enforceability of contracts, there's a legal term called force majeure, whereby the courts may take the position that a contract's not enforceable because one or both parties to the contract, for whatever reason, are unable to fulfill it. So they may take the pandemic situation as caused enough harm or the lack of resources or the ability to actually undertake to complete the contract. And then the courts may rule that the contract to be unenforceable. So again, something that you have to talk to your lawyers about. So that's it. I'm waiting for questions and happy to try to answer them for you.
All right, so if anybody has any questions, please enter them in the question and answer box or raise your hand and I will unmute you. Stan, we have one question right now. Would problems with childcare be a legitimate excuse not to return to work? Would they still be eligible for SURB and avoid termination on this basis?
The answer is maybe. Like every situation is based on its merits. I really don't know the answer to that particular one. I know payment under the SURB makes you, lack of childcare makes you eligible for the SURB. As far as termination, I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay, awesome. We don't have any questions yet. I'll just wait a couple minutes. There's another one. What do you think the biggest trap in these programs could be?
The biggest trap is people trying to put employees on the payroll that really don't exist. I've heard comments and people talking about it where they're going to go back and try to create T4s for people, perhaps family members that hadn't been on the payroll in 2019 and now amend their T4 returns, create T4s for those people, and try to make it look like they had been on the payroll and try to collect the wage subsidy. Please don't do it. The other thing is to take additional dividends with the business account and try to take advantage of it by boosting the payroll and trying to backdate having a business account. So there's lots of traps. The best advice is be straight up. And again, if you're not sure about something, ask. I'm available to answer questions. ORAC put out a message several months ago when all this started about my availability to handle questions that ORAC members have. Happy to advise on those particular situations.
Perfect. Looks like that's all the questions we have. So moving on to the giveaway. So we are running a giveaway for this episode that includes 2 green fee passes to Richmond Hill Golf Club, a $100 Sport Check gift card, 2 sets of gloves, 2 packs of golf balls, and 2 golf shoe bags. So if you would like to enter, you've already completed the first step by attending this webinar. If you could please complete the post-webinar survey that will be emailed out shortly. You will be entered into the contest, and the winners will be announced on July 14th at 2 p.m. on social media. And finally, our upcoming ORAC 2.0 episodes. We have an episode on July 22nd, sponsored by Yorkland Controls, building controls and operations in the COVID environment. And then also an episode on August 12th, sponsored by Keep Right, refrigeration on new energy efficient regulations and new refrigerants. So keep an eye out for those email invitations to those webinars. And we will also be running other contests for those webinars as well. So thank you very much, Stan, for your time. Yeah.
I just want to make one final comment. I believe ORAC is going to be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint to all the participants. What I suggest you do, share that in your office. Make sure that people that didn't attend or people that are involved in your company know about the programs, know about the situations. Get them involved in discussions as to how you can best put these programs to work and how you can help the programs maintain and improve your business.